Initiating moisture.
It's that special time of year again, everyone's favorite time of year, where the family gathers together and plops their swamp asses down on the couch to watch the Moisties. It's a tradition as old as time itself and more sacred than Christmas. We look at the entire year's movies and games and tell you what the best ones were. This year's a little bit different though. This is going to be a first in Moisties history. Since this year was so fucked when it came to movies, we're only going to be doing top 3 best and worst movies. Now please Redditors, don't get out your pitchfork yet. It wasn't a decision we came to lightly. We didn't want to call this audible. We like doing the top 5 best and worst. It really has become a staple in American culture to watch the top 5 best and worst movies from the Moisties. But this year, I don't even think 10 movies came out in total. So with our backs pushed up against the lockers by the pandemic, we had no choice but to only have top 3. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it with number 3, Mulan. I think no one is surprised to see Mulan making this list here for the top 3 worst movies of 2020. The movie is not only insulting to fans of the original, but it's insulting to anyone that even likes movies. It's just not good in anything that it tries to do or be. It strips itself of all of its original's charm and is left just an empty husk, this fucking sick puppet that Disney forced to dance on screen for money. And luckily it didn't work, the movie flopped, which is fantastic, there is still some justice in the world, but there's just nothing to like about Mulan. There's nothing emotional about it. The most emotional I got when watching Mulan was when I couldn't decide if I wanted to go take a shit during it or not because I'd missed some of it, and then I ultimately decided that it was probably going to be more interesting for me to take a shit than watch the movie. That was the most emotion I felt throughout the entire runtime of Mulan. Just a bit of stress in making that decision. It's just not anything worth watching. It's not so bad it's good, it's just straight ass cheeks. There's really not a lot to like about the movie, and it really feels like it was thrown together super haphazardly in Movie Maker. Like, the cuts they make in this movie make no sense. Like, all of a sudden they'll be faced with this problem like, oh my god, there's an army coming, what are we gonna do? And then Mulan sees a rock 5 miles away, and then literally 1 second later she's behind that rock in a flanking position about to cause like some kind of apocalyptic avalanche out of nowhere. Things just happen out of nowhere. It's a bad movie. Like, it is just not well put together, and there's just nothing to like, except for maybe a couple scenes of action where it has like some wire shit going on, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I've always liked, but it's not even done well enough in this movie to redeem it. It's just not good. Absolutely deserving of the number 3 spot on this list. Now moving on to the number 2 spot on the Moisties top 3 worst movies of 2020, Artemis Fowl. Back-to-back Disney entries. The 2020 year has not been kind to Disney. Artemis Fowl is without exaggeration the absolute worst Disney movie they have ever made. If fucking Walt Disney himself drew 5 pages of furry hentai in the 1940s, it would be better than the entire movie of Artemis Fowl. Artemis Fowl felt like an experiment from Disney to see if they could make a movie based entirely on Cleverbot answers. Like, they just fed a bunch of Artemis Fowl facts from the books to Cleverbot, and whatever Cleverbot's nonsense response was became part of the movie and the script for the characters to read from, because it is fucking nonsensical. For those that don't know, Cleverbot's like this fucking AI thing where you just ask stupid questions and it gives dumb fucking answers. And even Cleverbot's answers had to be better than this movie's script. Really, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that all of the actors that are in this movie never actually went to set or even knew they were in this movie. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that they were like deep faked 3D models that they put in here, because it is robotic. It's like a bunch of androids trying to read lines. Watching this movie is like a psychosis simulator. You don't know what's real or not, and you're just left in this perpetual fucking confusion. It's a mess. The narrative is so bad, too. The most nonsensical plot of probably any movie I've ever seen. At least in other movies, there's a point A and a point B, and things happen to get to the end. In this movie, 1,000 things just happen for no reason. For example, the movie revolves around Artemis Fowl's dad getting kidnapped by a big evil villain, who, by the way, is only on screen for 3 or 4 scenes across the entire movie. And also, by the way, the teaser trailer for this movie doesn't actually exist in the movie. None of those scenes from the trailer even made it to the real movie, so I don't know what the fuck we were left with, just like the leftovers of whatever disaster happened when they were editing. So it's like completely misleading if you watch the trailers. That's not the actual movie. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked already. Artemis Foul's dad is kidnapped by a villain that you never really fucking see and who doesn't really do anything. There's no stakes. And the only way to save his dad is by finding the Acleus, which is this crazy treasure that's never explained. You don't know what it does or why they want it. And then there's an entire crew of fairies in another civilization that for some reason all decide that they need the Acleus too, and they send one fairy girl who goes to this giant tree that Artemis Fowl happened to be waiting there with a sniper. He tranquilizes her. They then lock the fairy in the basement in a cage, and she fucking hates them, spitting on them, you know, curse you, Artemis Fowl, you piece of shit. And then the next scene, she's their best friend. Artemis Fowl, reading some of his dad's books, decides that the Acleus has to be in the house, even though that's never explained. And if the Acleus never left the house, why did the fairies say that it was lost and needed to be found in the first place, since it never fucking left the house to begin with? But anyway, once the fairy gets kidnapped, the entire fairy civilization sends their entire army to Artemis Foul's house. And then when the lead fairy goes to talk to Artemis Fowl, he says, "You can't come in." And to that, the lead fairy says, "Well, okay then, I guess we're fucked." So the fairies, being outsmarted by Artemis Fowl, who just says, "Please don't send your army in," decides that the only way they're going to save the fairy and get the Acleus is by having a dwarf come in. So they have Josh Gad come in, and he breaks his jaw and starts shoveling dirt with his mouth and shitting it out his ass. And he tunnels into Artemis Foul's house and somehow finds a hidden safe behind a painting where the Acleus is. There's just nothing, there's no stakes here, and things just happen for no reason. It's like some terrible fucking fan fiction someone would have written about Artemis Fowl 30 years ago. It's baffling. And then after finding the Acleus, the day is saved because the fairy uses it to teleport Artemis Foul's dad back from the main villain, and the movie ends and the fairy army just leaves. It's so fucking stupid. That's not even half of it. That doesn't even cover the main bases. But that's like the main beats. It is so fucking dumb. Artemis Fowl absolutely takes the second position. And you're probably asking yourself, Charlie, how does it get worse than Artemis Fowl? There's no way there was a movie worse than Artemis Fowl this year, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Cuties. Number 1. Cuties. The worst movie not only of this year, but I think probably the worst movie I've ever seen come out. Regardless of whatever the director's intentions were, what she ended up creating was a movie that catered towards pedophiles. It is a movie that hypersexualizes children for the entire duration, and a movie I could only stomach 30 or 40 minutes of. It was truly repulsive and disgusting, and it honestly felt like I had committed a crime by even turning that on Netflix. I feel like I have to look outside of my window and check for like a flower van with a satellite dish on top of it, making sure there's not like the FBI in there waiting to bust me for just watching it. It was a movie that's so bad that it spawned a lawsuit against it because it was classified as legal pedophilia. It was legally classified as pedophilia. It's crazy that this movie even got made and that people still defend it. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if what you end up creating contributes to the problem that you're trying to address, then you fucked up and that's your fault. The movie does nothing to speak against the hypersexualization of children and really just seems to encourage it throughout its entire runtime. It is absolutely disgusting stuff. If you wanted to make a movie talking about the evils of sexualizing children, you could have done it by either not using actual 11-year-old actresses or just not had the camera start panning in on their vaginas and asses in every single fucking scene and having wet t-shirt contests, have them sending vagina pictures in the movie and all the other heinous shit you had them doing. There was plenty of ways to speak out against the sexualization of children without actually sexualizing kids along the way. Without a single doubt, it is the worst movie of the year. So that concludes this year's Moisties for the 2020 movie season. These were the top 3 worst movies of the year. That's it. See ya.